time for an April wrap-up. Hi, I'm Kelly, and if you're new here, I talk about books and writing. Today we're going to talk about the books I read in April. I started so many books in April. I read a lot of pages in April. I did not complete that many books in April. I did complete a totally fine amount, but I had started several others, some of which I'm going to DNF, some of which I'm going to take years to read, some of which I'm just not in like the right mood for right now, some of which I'll finish in May. But I figured I would talk about all of them instead of just the ones I completed. And I also want to revisit my TBR structure. If you have been following along since January, I decided for the first third of this year to make myself this new TBR structure, which I had like slots I had to fill every month, to see if it would help me with a couple different things. I had some goals in mind when looking at my TBR. The first thing was I had a lot of physical books that I wanted to read. And I have a very large physical TBR, and I wanted to kind of get a handle on that. Specifically before May. And then my second thing was that I had a lot of book of the month books. I was getting very behind on my book of the month books, buying a lot of books and then not reading them right away. So I also wanted to get on top of my book of the month books. And the third thing was I have a lot of very long books that I was sort of intimidated to read that I just wasn't starting. So for my TBR slots, I had that I wanted to read 2 physical romance novels a month. I wanted to read at least 2 book of the months. I'm sorry, I keep looking over here. There's the most adorable bunny in my front yard right now, just literally like on its hind legs. I wanted to read 1 wild card physical book a month. I wanted to start a big fat book, not necessarily finish it, but read a chunk of a big fat book. And I wanted to read 1 ebook, so I would make sure I was staying on top of my arcs. In terms of how those went, I did a really good job getting back on top of my book of the month books. I did just order books yesterday for May, so I have 3 coming. I took the month of April off, so I felt like it was okay to get 3 in May. But I did a good job. The only unread book of the month books I have right now are The Secret History, which I am considering DNFing. I'm going to give myself until November 2025 to see if I do want to complete that book. If I make it through an entire Dark Academia season without wanting to read it, then I will officially DNF it. And then the other one I haven't read yet is Ninth House, which when I got that one, I knew I wasn't going to read it right away. So I feel okay about not reading it yet. So that's one goal that I did manage to actually accomplish with this TBR. The physical copy books, I did have quite a lot of romance, and I did do a good job of reading 2 a month. So I think I now have only 2 or 3 physical copy romances left on my TBR shelf. I did a very good job at getting those down with the 2 physical copies a month. And some months I did use ebooks for some of those categories, but I did do a good job with that. The big fat book, it didn't really help. I read part of The Secret History in January, very little of it in February, none of it in March. I think I might have even read none of it in February. And then I switched to reading Night of the Witch, and I didn't bring these books down. I'll put the cover up here for you. I read very little of it in March, and then I actually didn't read it in April. And that's a book that I'm not going to DNF. I just realized I wasn't actually in the mood for it. I like witchy reads all year round, but that particular book has a very dark witchy vibe, and I wasn't really in the mood for it in the spring. Honestly, I feel like I get back in that particular mood in like end of July, August, and then it carries on through November-ish. So I'll probably pick that back up at some point later in the year. But I still have a huge pile of big fat books that are unread up there. So what does this mean? I said I would give myself 4 months to see if I liked this TBR, and I'm going to switch it up. I am. Instead, because the hard thing was I only had 1 wild card slot really. And I have a lot of non-romance physical books up there. So it didn't really help me that much that I had 1 wild card slot, and a lot of months that wild card slot was taken up by like a random book I got from the library or a book I had to read for book club or something like that. So from now on. And by now on, I mean for the next 4 months. I like doing things in 4-month sections. I feel like 3 months is just not quite long enough to settle into a routine. So for the next 4 months, I'm not having slots. I'm having 5 books for my physical TBR. And that can include book of the month. I will read 5 books a month for my physical TBR. And then after that, I can fill in with ebooks so that I'm still staying on top of my arcs. Because it's not unheard of for me to read 8 books in a month, or some months I go crazy and read like 11. That's pretty odd though. But going forward, 5 physical books for my TBR. Whatever else I want after that is fine. Stay on top of my arcs with my ebooks, etc. Okay, let's talk about what I actually read in April now, right? Right. I'll start by saying I read 2 book of the months. I read 2 romance novels. I read 1 ebook. And I began 4 wild cards and a second ebook. The first book I read in April was The Wedding People by Alison Espach. I finished this and immediately gave it to my sister because she wanted to read it. She texted me and was like, here are 6 books I want to read. Have you read any of them? Do you think I'd like any of them? And then I said, what are you in the mood for? And she said, I kind of want to be sad. And so I gave her The Wedding People, and I also gave her The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. And I was like, I think you'll really like this because she likes Hollywood stories. I'm going to give you a little bit more than the blurb gives you about this book because I do think it was slight disservice the blurb didn't have this. Our main character is Phoebe, and Phoebe has come to this beautiful hotel in Newport, Rhode Island, which if you don't live in the United States, Newport is like an old money city on the East Coast. And it's a very expensive hotel. She can't really afford to be there, and she has come there to commit suicide. And that's where we start. And that was not in the blurb, and I feel like it should have been. I don't know if I would have picked it up if it was in the blurb. And I did end up really enjoying this book, so maybe they knew what they were doing. But I do think you need to give people a heads up on that kind of subject matter. So basically what happens is she's kind of at that hotel by accident. There is a wedding going on, and the bride thought that she reserved every single room so that every single person staying at the hotel was a part of the wedding. So there's a lot of wedding stuff going on. And Phoebe's this woman who's just happens to be there. The first night she's there, she ends up sort of stuck in the elevator with the bride. And the bride's very pushy and very much like a Bridezilla character. And she says well, what are you doing here? And Phoebe just offhandedly says well, I'm here to commit suicide. And the bride loses it and is like, you cannot do that to me because my wedding will forever be basically overshadowed by the fact that someone died during it. And Phoebe kind of keeps putting it off. Now, I will say that the plot line of suicide, the theme of suicide, is similar to how it is handled in the Midnight Library. That is to say, very quickly in the book, you realize that's not actually what this book is going to be about. It's kind of about finding a second chance at life. And I did really enjoy that. But there are some other hard themes in this book that I'm not going to tell you about because they are spoilery. But if you are sensitive to basically anything, I would recommend looking them up before you begin reading it. It wasn't something that was hard for me to read about, but it's definitely something that I think is hard for other people to read. You end up getting to follow Phoebe living her life for the weekend as if her actions have no consequences. And she's not a bad person because of that. She's just more courageous. And I did really like the story. The setting very much felt like an Ellen Hildebrand novel with Newport kind of being a character of his own, how Nantucket is kind of a character of its own in hers. And I liked that. It's definitely contemporary fiction. It ends on a high note. It doesn't end happily ever after, which I also appreciated because it felt more realistic. But I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was a good read. I got it from Book of the Month as my Book of the Year choice. If you've been a member for over a year, you get one of the top 5 finalists for the Book of the Year. And this is the one that I picked, and I'm glad I did pick it. Okay, my next read was Wild Dark Shore by Charlotte McConaughey. I was so apprehensive about starting this book for more than one reason. One, her other 2 books, Once There Were Wolves and Migrations, are 2 of the best books I've read in the last 20 years. So I had a lot of, I didn't want my hopes to be dashed for it to be another favorite. Also, Migrations in particular really destroyed me emotionally for a very long time, to the point that I still think about that book. And I read that book in January of 2022. 2023, I think, maybe 2024. It might have been January 2024. I read it a long time ago, and I still think about it more than once a month, probably. So I was worried about starting it. I'm glad I read it. It has a lot of hallmarks of a Charlotte McConaughey book. We're in the near future, and there's a catastrophic climate change event happening, which is not unlike migrations. I read Once There Were Wolves longer ago. Once There Were Wolves didn't feel as end of the world-ish as these two do. The setting is Shearwater, which is a fictional island near Antarctica, but it's based on a real island, which I can't remember the name of now, but Charlotte McConaughey talked about it in the acknowledgements. Here it is. It's Macquarie Island. In the book, Shearwater is home to a seed bank, but the rising tides are making it no longer a safe place for a seed bank. This island is going to disappear and everything is going to flood. So there's currently a family living there as caretakers, a man named Dominic and his 3 children, 2 who are teens and 1 who's more like 7, 8 years old. And they are going to be evacuated when the book starts. I think it's in 8 weeks. There is an abandoned scientific research lab there that used to be home to scientists, but no one is there anymore. And the book begins with a woman washing ashore to the island and somehow surviving. So this has a very deep mystery in it. Who is this woman? There is a very deep unrest among the family that's there, that you can tell that something has happened recently on this island and they are not talking about it. Not unlike Migrations and Once There Were Wolves, there is such a feeling of hopelessness, not only with the world, but with everyone's lives. Where they are in life feels very hopeless. This book is very beautiful. It is sad. It's not as sad as Migrations. If you read Migrations and like me just cried and cried and cried and couldn't stop crying, and your child came over and told you to stop reading that book, it wasn't like that. I did shed quite a few tears. I did not feel as affected by Wild Dark Shore as I did by Once There Were Wolves or Migrations, but I think it's because I've already read Once There Were Wolves and Migrations. I think that I was more emotionally prepared for a Charlotte McConaughey book, because there's nothing about this book that isn't soul destroying like the other two are. And the ending is perfectly heartbreaking, I guess is what you could say, with the right amount of hope. I just think because I've already read 2 books by her, I had already been so greatly affected by those 2 that this one didn't feel as soul destroying. I really liked this book. I always think it's funny when I have to like review a book that's so emotionally taxing, because I say things like this destroyed me, but I mean that in such a positive note. I really did enjoy this book. I think if you've ever read a Charlotte McConaughey book and you've liked them, you should definitely read this. I think if you're interested in looking at the future from a scientific perspective in a very real way, this isn't like the world is ending and electricity doesn't exist and people are killing each other in the streets. This is like, here are some things that are happening and what it might mean. There's a large part of this book has to do with terrible fires in Australia that are going on. And we had that in 2020. Australia was on fire. And so it feels very realistic in its futurism. Wild Dark Shore by Charlotte McConaughey. Another great read by a great author. I will definitely read everything that woman writes. Now let's switch gears completely. After reading that, I knew I needed something light. And I purposefully saved this book. I was originally going to read Wild Dark Shore in March, and I just couldn't do it. And so I was also originally going to read this book in March. And then because I didn't read Wild Dark Shore, I was like, I have to just hold off on this one too, because I knew I was going to need a pick-me-up after. And I picked up Love at First Flight by Janine Amesta. And it was a good choice. So this is a contemporary romance novel. It does start a little sad. We have Sela, and she is grieving the loss of her father, which is a sudden loss. And her mother and her sisters, she has 2 younger sisters, are also going through this grieving process. Sela has overtaken her father's company, which is a hot air balloon tour company. And she is sort of trying to remain strong while everyone else falls apart, which her family is viewing as a little bit cold. She felt very realistic, though, in her reaction to losing her dad. It felt extremely realistic. Now, Rex is a park ranger who works at a nearby national park, particularly with birds. He really loves birds. He has a pet crow. And he schedules a hot air balloon ride with Sela to propose to his girlfriend. And it goes badly, obviously. And she says no. And then they have a moment where they land and Sela accidentally tips over the basket and Rex falls on top of her. And it's a moment of what the heck? So then we time jump 6 months, which I liked a lot because I don't know if I would have liked it if all of a sudden Sela and Rex are getting romantically involved after he's literally just been dumped by his girlfriend. And they become friends and they decide they're going to try to make this bird sanctuary at the national park and that her hot air balloon company is going to be part of it, with giving tours and great shots from above and all that. This is definitely a weird meet cute, slowly become friends to lovers. And I really enjoyed it. Also, I really liked how Sela and Rex both had a lot of stuff to work through on their own. Sela is working through the grief of losing her dad, but she's also working through how she's handling it differently than her sisters and her mom and how that's changing their family dynamic, which I enjoyed that part of the book a lot. Rex is doing some personal growth. He is trying to figure out why on earth he thought he should propose to his ex who was we are not there. That is not what this relationship is. This is just for fun and how he didn't notice it. So I enjoyed that a lot. It's spicy. You feel happy at the end. It's a little sad, but not to the point where I'm crying, which I appreciated after reading Wild Dark Shore. I needed something a little happier. So if you're looking for a contemporary romance with heart, definitely pick up Love at First Flight. Next, I picked up Lord Holt Takes a Bride by Vivian Loret. It's all romance from here on out until we get to the books I didn't finish. This is a Regency romance with more than one kidnapping. Thank you. I needed something like that, especially in April, which ended up being kind of a crazy month, which I'll talk about at the end of the video. We begin with Winifred. She's engaged to an absolute a-hole. He is not nice. He is openly in love with his mistress. He says mean stuff to her. And her parents are not great. They are pretty rude to her. She's curvy, she's a little bigger, and everyone just disparages the way she looks and that she's not attractive. And it is sad reading about the place she finds herself in. She has two best friends who are great, and they are trying to write a book about scoundrels, but also you are not going to marry this man. This man is going to make you miserable. So one of her friends is my cousin is going to be waiting in a carriage outside and you are going to escape the wedding. And that's what we're doing. And she's I'm not doing that. So the night before her wedding, her friends also kidnap Lord Holt, who's a well-known scoundrel, so that they can interrogate him and ask him about how he, his mating habits. And Winifred happens upon them and she's we are not doing this. We are letting this man go. And then they finagles it that they can let him go, but he's, takes them a little while to come after them. What ends up happening the next morning is that Winifred is I'm going to marry this guy. I'm going to do it. And he sends her a present in the morning. And she's oh my God, maybe he's not going to be a monster. And she opens the present and it's this beautiful necklace. And there's a note. And it's to his mistress. And he calls her a cow in the note. As soon as I marry this cow and finish my husbandly duty, I'll be right back in your arms. And she's just destroyed by it. And she shows it to her dad, and her dad's well, you're still marrying him. Wear the necklace so he knows he sent it to you. And she just can't do that to herself anymore. And so she panics and flees, and she gets in the wrong carriage, and she accidentally gets in the carriage that has Lord Holt in it. And he's hungover, and then they run away. And it becomes a really hilarious road trip romance where they've got he has these debts and people are chasing after them and they're in the countryside and they lose all their money and she loses her dress, and it was really fun. And I really liked how into her Lord Holt is immediately. physically in particular, because she's had such a rough go of it with her awful fiance. And she's also just like this really, really sunshine character. He's not too much of like a grumpy, but she's just like positive attitude. And I really loved it. It was a very fun read. This was recommended at the, I've talked about how I created this document of all new historical romance authors I wanted to try. And this was one of the authors, and I will definitely read another Vivian Lorette. It was super fun. It's already time for my last completed book of April, which was The Highlander's Promise by Lindsay Sands. This is number like 6, 7. I'm somewhere in the middle now. And this is Ole's book. And I've been wanting to read his book for a while. Pretty much since I read book 3, I wanted to read Ole's. Ole is the oldest of the Buchanan brothers. We've been following them quite a bit the last couple books I've read. 4, 5, 6, 7 are all Buchanan brothers. I think 8 is. I think 9 might be. 10, 11, 12 might be other people. I've read 12. That's not a Buchanan brother. But Ole is the oldest. He has a very bad scar from a battle he was in that took the life of his twin brother. So he's pretty stoic, and he has had a betrothed break off their engagement due to his scar. So he's also pretty jaded. This one begins with Ole being at a hunting cabin with one of his brothers, and I think their uncle might be there. I can't remember exactly who's there, and like one maid. And they're on the coast one day, and they see this, it looks like a shipwreck. And they go out there to see if there's any survivors. And there's a woman tied to a mast, just floating. And she's alive, but in horrible shape. And she wakes up for a minute, and she thinks Ole is an angel come to save her. And then he's like, we'll find your family, we'll find your home. And she freaks out. He's like, don't send me back to my family. Don't make me marry that man, and then passes out. Ole has this brother named Rory, who is like modern medical doctor living in medieval times, and he saves everybody all the time. They call for him. He's taking care of this woman. She's unconscious for a couple weeks, and they're just sort of like forcing her to drink water and broth. And then she wakes up and she has no idea who she is, and she has no idea where she is. She doesn't remember anything. She doesn't have like short-term amnesia. She doesn't remember anything about her life. She thinks Ole is her brother, and then he's like, I'm not your brother. And then she's like, oh, you're my husband. And he doesn't correct her because he's kind of been like falling in love with her slowly while she's been unconscious. And then Rory, his brother who's a healer, is like, don't correct her, because anytime she tries to remember, she faints or she like is in a lot of pain. And he's like, I don't want her to think she's somewhere dangerous where she's like not among the loved ones. So just continue to pretend being her husband. It was pretty fun. That was pretty fun. I'm not going to lie. Because she's like, I am so attracted to this man, even though I am so injured. And like, she had a bad head wound also. They had to shave part of her hair, and she's very self-conscious about it. And Ollie's like, I do not care. So we go from there. This has, obviously it had a near drowning. It has arrows in the back. It has more head injuries. It has poisonings. It has pushing down the stairs. It has everything you would expect from a Lindsay Sands Highland Bride romance. And it was super fun. It was a fun romp. I counted, I think there's 12 books in the series. I have 4 left. And I'm okay. It's okay. I'm like, what am I going to do when they run out? But it's okay, because I only read one of these like every other month. So it's going to get me through the rest of 2025. But it was so fun. Now let's talk about everything I began. I started The Garden Against Time by Olivia Lang. I am on page 62. I have both read and listened to this. So I read the first chapter and liked it. And then I was getting some of my garden bed set up. I garden quite a bit. And I was just really itching to garden in April, which you can't do a ton of gardening where I live in April. But I was like, I can plant a ton of lettuce seeds, which was part of my plan to do this year, because like the bunnies won't stop getting into my garden and like destroyed my pumpkins and zucchinis last year because they just ate all the blossoms. So one of my friends, who's a writer, her name is Hadley Gray. That's not her real name, sorry. That took me a while to think of. That's why it took me a minute. She is an actual farmer, and she told me that a lot of times when bunnies won't get out of her garden, she does a bunny salad bar. So she plants like a ton of lettuce, and it's just kind of like cheap lettuce seeds that you don't really have to worry about whether or not you're harvesting them, because you plant a ton also. So I'm doing that. So when I was doing that, I wanted to listen to this book. And so Hoopla, which my library uses for audiobooks and ebooks, had it. And so I checked it out and I listened to it a lot and it was nice. And this is a nice read. I'm going to read this slow though, because I did really like listening to it when I was gardening. So I do think I'm going to listen to more of it while I'm gardening. I'm in the middle of chapter 3 right now. So I'll probably finish reading chapter 3 and then listen to chapter 4. I'm gardening. The chapters are quite long, which is like not my favorite, everybody knows. So chapter 3 is 40 pages. And then I'll probably listen to some, read some, listen to some, read some. I'm guessing I'm going to read this book all summer. I'm just going to read it when I want to read a little bit of nature writing, that type of thing. Next, I read, let's see what page I'm on, 37 pages of this book called Buddhism by Malcolm David Eckel. The Origins, Beliefs, Practices, Holy Texts, and Sacred Places of Buddhism. Okay, so I took my kids to the library. I don't remember what it was. Towards the beginning of the month. I checked out a bunch of books that I'm going to read for research purposes. I haven't started it yet. And I also grabbed this. It was near the books I checked out for research purposes. I've always been really interested in learning more about world religions. So I was like, oh, that looks like a very accessible text. So I grabbed it. And then we went down to the children's department and my kids wanted to hang out for a while. So I read a bit. And then I've read a bit more. Honestly, it's kind of a dry text on Buddhism. So I'm not going to finish it. This is going to be a DNF. I didn't retain that much also because it wasn't that interesting. I definitely think I need to find a different book on Buddhism to learn more about it. So I'm going to take my bookmark out officially and I'm going to return this maybe this afternoon. Let's keep it going. Next, I read the first 10 pages of Lady Susan by Jane Austen. I talked about this maybe being my wild card book this month. I also talked about The Garden Against Time being my wild card book. So I started both of them. I started this on a day that I was like in a mood. And I'm like, what if I just read this whole book today? And then I didn't really like it that much. So I read, it's told in letters, which I like books told in letters, and especially because I just read 84 Charing Cross Road, which is told in letters and really enjoyed. But I was just kind of like not having it. I was very much in a Jane Austen mood this month. I got very sick, which I will talk about when I'm done talking about books. And I watched both the 2005 Pride and Prejudice, I think twice. And even though that's not my favorite one, the 1995 one is my favorite one because I'm an elder millennial, but I really like the 2005 one when I'm sick because it's really beautiful and the music's really calming and I can just sort of zone out. Whereas when I'm watching my favorite one, I tend to pay attention more. And then I also rewatched, it's either 2006 or 2007, PBS/BBC did A Sense and Sensibility with Dan Stevens playing, what's his name? Edward? What's their last name? Ferris. Dan Stevens played Edward Ferris. Dominic Cooper played Willoughby. I can't remember any of the actors' names in it. Mr. Weasley was in it. And I rewatched that with my daughters. They came and went, which was hilarious because when my 9-year-old was watching it, she watched the most with me. She watched like the whole first episode. And they're talking about Marianne at the beginning and they say something about her being almost 17. And then they're talking about Colonel Brandon like 20 minutes later. And they're like, he's not old, he's 35. And my 9-year-old goes, wait. He's 35 and she is 17? We had to pause it and talk about how life was different in the Regency time period when it came to age gaps. But I did get a lot of Jane Austen in this month. It just, Lady Susan wasn't working for me. And Lady Susan might work for me more in the summer and when I'm not terribly sick. And then lastly, I read one essay in The Irigaray Reader, which is a collection of essays by Luce Irigaray, who is my favorite philosopher, which is so funny because I minored in philosophy. So I have a favorite philosopher, even though I never read philosophy anymore. But I really loved 2 of Luce Irigaray's books. This Sex, Which Is Not One, which changed the way I thought about the world. And then East Meets West, I think is the other one. Between East and West. Hold, please. I can just grab them off my shelf. So it's Between East and West was the second one I read. But This Sex, Which Is Not One, which is my favorite. It's really, really cool. But I am kind of interested now to read these essays little by little to see how they hold up in a more modern world. I don't know exactly if they've got the dates these were. Okay, so, oh no, it doesn't say when each of these essays were written. That would be nice if they had that. The collection was put together in 1991, so obviously everything is written before 1991. Let's see when her other books were written. She's still alive, I think, or maybe just died. She's in her 90s. Okay, so this one was in 1999, so this came out after that. And when did this Sex Witches Not One come out? This came out in 1977. So she's obviously been philosophizing for a while. The biggest thing I got out of this first essay, which is going to be like kind of hilarious, is that she wanted to be friends with Simone de Beauvoir. And Simone de Beauvoir like ghosted her. Basically, she was like, I would love to have a conversation with her. We all read The Second Sex. We all da-da-da-da-da. And I reached out to her and I never heard back from her. And I was like, well, I'm here for the level of cattiness mixed in with my philosophy texts. But this is the book at the beginning I said it'll take me years to read. This will take me years to read. I'm not going to just sit down and read however many essays there are in here about feminism and philosophy from the point of view of someone living mostly during the 60s, 70s, and 80s and getting their philosophy from that time period. But I'll check in with you every once in a while about this. What if this became a philosophy channel? It's not going to. And then lastly, I did read a little bit of an ebook, which I'm opening right now. And it is Highland Heart by Kirsten Osborne. And I'm at 31% of it. It's a medieval romance that's kind of got like Brave vibes. There's like this Highland Games and there's this woman named Fiona and everyone wants to marry her. It's a little sweet for me. The hero is like sweet as pie, like definitely just feeling all the like romantic chivalrous love towards her. There's no like heat, I guess, which I'll see if there ends up being any. I have an arc for this. It's my first time with this publisher. I think it's called Dragon Blade. And I requested 2 of their books because they were like all over NetGalley to see if maybe I'd like them. Right now I'm kind of feeling middle of the road about it, but obviously I'm only at 30%, so anything can happen. Okay, so that's everything. That's everything I read into completion and everything I started, and I feel okay about it. April was a really crazy month. I had a huge amount of edits to do for Hauntings and House Witchery, which is coming out in September. There's like different stages of editing, and I had a very large stage of editing. And the day I got my edits back, my daughter got both Fluby and COVID. And so then we had about 18 days that were pretty rough. I stayed healthy for a couple days, and then I just got flu B, and I got so sick. I was really out of commission for about 10 days. And so I wasn't reading much in those 10 days. I got an extension on my edits, thankfully, which was extremely nice, and I just turned them in yesterday. But April got a little dicey because of that. So reading 5 books for me in April and then reading a smattering of some other ones felt fantastic. That felt like way more than I thought I was going to be able to do. So I felt really good about it. I'm not going to do a May TBR video because my birthday's in 2 days, and tomorrow, because my birthday's on a Saturday, and it's going to be like, well, there's a soccer game at my niece's birthday party. The day before my birthday, I'm going to do my big bookstore go around where I go to a bunch of bookstores. I think I'm gonna go to 5 this year, and I buy a ton of books to read for May through, there's still books I bought last year that I haven't read yet. So I buy a lot of books that I read over years. And I'm going to most likely not film that because I get a little stressed out filming in public, but I will film a giant haul and then tell you what I think I'm gonna read most likely first off through those. But if you hung out during this very long video, thank you for staying. What did you read in April that you loved? Have you read any of these books? Besides the Wedding People and Wild Dark Shore and Love at First Flight are all new. And then we have Highlander's Promise and Lord Holt Takes a Bride, which are not new, but, I feel like still in like the zeitgeist. And then we have some books like a Introduction to Buddhism and some philosophy books that I'm assuming no one's read, but if you read those, let's talk about it. Let's talk about Lucy Rigore in the comments today. If you made it this far and you don't want to write words, I will take either a rain cloud emoji or some flowers because it's a very rainy day here today, but all my daffodils are up. Apparently I forgot to plant tulips last year, which I vaguely remember being like, not planting tulips and just planting so many daffodils. And I have some hyacinths up too, and my apple blossom tree is about to bloom, and it's like the most beautiful thing in the world when it does. I will definitely take a picture and put it on Instagram if you follow me there. And my magnolia has already bloomed, but it's raining so hard, I'm assuming most of the petals are going to be on the ground. But that's the end of April, beginning of May for you. And now that it's officially May, let's bring on those May flowers. I'll see you soon in another video, but for now, I hope you're in the middle of a good book, about to start reading a good book, or about to start writing a great book. See you later.